I'm Nick Hernandez, and you're listening to the Positivity Matters podcast. On this show, we focus on well being science and leaders in a variety of fields that are interested in trying to apply it. Today, I have Professor Andrew Hanna from UNL. He earned his PhD in business with an emphasis in management from UNL in 2021. His research focuses on how individuals without formal positions of power come to gain influence and cause and effects of working on concurrent teams and latent variable methodology, in addition to many other things. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Nick. Good to be here, man.
So tell us what is what's been occupying your intellectual interests lately.
Wow. A lot. It kind of seems like if you gave me another 5 minutes, I might have something new to talk about. But this summer's been really inundated with, I don't know, I've become very focused on this idea of attention lately, actually, just because it's been something that's kind of been sparked to the forefront of my mind from like experiences in the classroom and interactions with other people around me. I've got a couple of daughters who are late teenagers now, and it's always very difficult to get anything but like from people, and like I come to find, more and more that it's just this like fragmented attention reality with so many people. I've been really inundated with that lately. I've been writing about the importance of attention to a lot of the things that we research and just, its impact on our daily lives. So that's been a very big thing for me lately. I'm really interested in it.
For the listeners, Andrew gave the example of someone talking to you over the sort of kind of glancing over the top of their phone every now and then when they have to. And they have this, I guess I will look over the top of my phone.
Yes. Yes. If they look up. No.
Yeah. Yeah. Attention. I see several things here that sort of jump out at me. Emergent leadership. Maybe
Yeah.
that's the short way of saying what I read to introduce
Yep.
you. I'm seeing Rwanda here. I've heard that there's classes being taught to business students at a skateboarding venue. There's so many things.
All sorts of it.
Yeah, maybe like one of the interesting things that I heard you talk about was life design. Maybe tell people about what this is and how it came to be and
Sure.
what the experience has been like.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess I would say on our topic at a high level here about positivity in some capacity, this was sort of motivated out of my interest in trying to, I guess, incite more positivity in some of our young people about their future. We have a lot of, we have a lot of candid conversation in class, and like one of these overarching things that I had noticed was, there seemed to be kind of a growing negative sentiment about people's futures amongst a lot of our like young people, and that's always kind of a concerning thing, right? Because you've got it all to look forward to, and I know that's scary, but I also know that should be hopefully met with a lot of enthusiasm. And one of my best friends here in town, has always been very focused on this kind of idea, Mike Smith. And Mike and I just really got to talking about it. He's always been so focused on youth and helping, like provide positive pathways for young people. So we just got to talking about it, and we were like, hey, let's use this design your life framework. And so, got certified through Stanford University in the Design Your Life coursework that Bill Burnett had put together. And it's really all about, hey, how do we help people see that there's a positive pathway for them moving forward that can be completely designed based off of getting really at the root of what matters to you. And so we do this class that we teach over at the Bay here in Lincoln. And we teach this on Saturdays to college students and members of the gap year program at the Bay, which were, 18 to 24-year olds that go through this program. They were maybe like students that took alternative path after high school, or maybe they didn't finish, or they didn't go to college. They don't really like necessarily maybe know how to take the next steps. And so we've taught this class to over 100 students now the last couple of years, and it just gets at, hey, what can we get to the foundation of what matters to you? Can we answer questions about what do you want in exchange for your time in life? And then can we start taking that information, which is super abstract, and going, now, how do I apply that? If I know these things, how do I design a path for myself in life that I'm going to be stoked about? Right. And because we just continuously tell people, it's like the more that you place that responsibility in your own hands, I think the better you end up feeling about it. Because we always use this saying in class. It's like, hey, after we go through all of this, you find yourself at a point in life where you go, I'm not very excited about my future. Then we go, if you designed it, then who should we be mad at? So that's really the rundown of that. We've had a real blast with that class. It's super awesome. We have students come over for about 4 hours every Saturday at the Bay, and it's largely like, let's give these young people some time to really sit and talk with each other about what matters and things that in perhaps other environments they might feel a little uncomfortable talking about.
I assume that money is one of those things that you can get for your time. What
Yes.
are some other key things that one can get for their time?
Yeah, it's this framework. We basically say there's like we started off by saying, like everybody loves to ask this question, what do you make? Right? Everybody's at least maybe in somewhere in their mind they're thinking about that. And so we say like, so what do you want to make? There's three things that you can make from your work. And one would be I make some money. That's that financial column. We have maybe I want to make a difference, which is impact, is what we call that one. And the third one is expression. And expression is just, hey, do you have autonomy? Do you feel like you have an active sense in making the decisions for yourself about what to do, how to do it, all those kinds of things? And so we always talk about, when we think about a maybe a job or career path, something like that, then what we do is we have them evaluate those three things. We put it kind of on a sliding scale. And we go, rate how much money you think you would make. How much of a difference would you make? How much expression would you be granted? And so we do that, and we have students really fill out and get to the heart of what would your ideal mix be of those three things. And then we have something relevant for them to compare a specific job or role against, and we have them look at that disparity between those things and go, okay, so how much different is the reality of this job from what you say you really want? Because that can be at least an initial test of going, do you really think this is going to be a great idea for you? If it's far different from what you say you'd really like. Because I think a lot of us jump into those situations and go, well, if I grit my teeth and bear it, it's probably going to get better. Or I'll come to find that that it's fine and I can deal with it. But I don't think any of us, when we're talking about what we really want in the future, I don't think any of us use that kind of language where we go, I guess I'll find a job that I don't love, but I guess I'll deal with it. Right? None of us would probably say that. So we just kind of caution them into going like, hey, why don't we just really figure out what you really want? And that's one of those things that we do is those what we call it's called a maker mix is the organizing framework that we use in that one.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was listening to a podcast recently where an economist who moved from the US to Luxembourg was studying the changes in happiness like in Europeans over time. And it's maybe a little bit of the what do we think is actually driving it, or what can economists prove that is driving the change in happiness. And it was the ones that really seemed to make a difference was the social support in the European countries. That if you look at happiness changes and changes in social support, that was what really tracked best with happiness. Um, and he greatly qualified it and said this is at the national level, not at the individual level. So I think at the individual level, like this, one thing that you mentioned before the show was something called self-determination theory, and it brings up autonomy, um, and maybe getting those things out there, when you're looking at the big picture. Uh, like there's things that affect like how our life goes that are outside of our control, and some things that are inside of our control.
Right.
So maybe the social supports is one of those that's to a limited extent within our control, but like
Kind of our like in our collective control, right? It's kind of like,
yeah,
I can't just like decide to have community. I got to have other people on board and we have to create community because nowhere is one person community, right? So there was a really cool book actually that got at this that, this is a big argument that Mike and I made quite a bit. And Mike, to a greater extent, when he's traveled around and talked, is, there's this book called Bowling Alone that was by Robert Putnam. And in that he talked about, like why the kind of like the social environment and that social support structure felt so different during decades like the 1970s, 1980s, because that was where those like community oriented endeavors, things like going bowling, like going here or there to hang out with other people in person because that's what you had to go do, like they were kind of at an all-time high, and therefore that also showed that, like when that stuff was present, we as people were much more likely to have a much higher baseline level of trust in the people around us and feel more like related and like it's an actual community. And those avenues for that kind of social support have been eroding over the last couple of decades, and so it makes it difficult. So it's almost just like, he always used that example that now it just feels like, even as like parents or people like that or something, like now it's like every house for themselves instead of being a neighborhood or a community where we could go out and feel like I can trust that my kids are fine out here. I know my neighbors. I know those people will help me out and keep my best interest in mind, those kinds of things. And so now, like it's probably why we also see kind of a rise of that idea of, like these like overprotective parents that are really like hostile towards other people and things like that, is because all that weight kind of seems to fall on them as one person because they don't feel like they have that relatedness and community to fall back on, right?
yeah, yeah. The scope of our relatedness, like some people are experiencing loneliness, and we hear that about that as kind of a social epidemic. And then
Yeah.
I think probably the that kind of correlates with this piece of the need for relatedness, or the need to belong from self-determination theory. And the what is the scope of connectedness, like how deep and how wide for that. I think everybody maybe has their own sort of internal connectedness meter, and maybe somewhere with both of those variables, like there's going to be some differences, but
Well, that's what's so interesting about, researching those kinds of things and really quickly, I think if you do anything that is like perception based, right? Because relatedness is inherently like it's perceptual. It's how do you feel? How related do you
mm,
feel? And some people might go, like I've got one very strong connection and I feel very related, and I feel connected. And some people would go, that's nowhere near enough. Like I don't feel good about that or something like that. And so, that's what's really interesting about when you get into measuring that kind of stuff and doing research in it is you'd find that two people's objective reality might be extremely different, but their subjective reality is very similar.
Hmm.
And that's what's really interesting about those things. So, and it's also the elusive thing about things like relatedness and community is um, to really feel like you've got a community around you means something quite different to different people. And so it takes different things to establish that. And so when we're trying to make a community for everyone, some people may be very satisfied with what we've done, and other people might go, this definitely falls short. This doesn't do what I need or what I'm looking for. It doesn't provide that.
One of the things that a community needs would be people, and then consciousness of how people what makes them tick. I think there's a great example of like intentional community right here at the UNL College of Business with an emphasis on being strengths based.
Yeah.
So I see that your top Clifton strengths are woo, relator, input, positivity, and futuristic. So for listeners who have not heard of strengths before, this is a tool that looks at 34 different human strengths, and the survey that they have ranks the kind of the degree to which they bring you a sense of joy and meaning, and it gives you sort of a self-referential subjective list. At the end of it, the idea is that if you focus on your what comes out as your top five strengths, like that's sort of your built-in motivator, or these things that are like, what's the fast track to joy and meaning? I think that's kind of my interpretation of it. Or yeah, anyways, tell us about your strengths. How do these play out through what you do?
Um, Well, they're great strengths for me in what I do, to be honest. Because like that, the WOO one, for like anybody that doesn't know, it's an acronym. It stands for winning others over. So it really, I think, just gets at the fact that you could put me in front of a wall and I could have a real nice conversation. So a lot of mine have to do with kind of what we would say are like relatedness themed strengths, and other ones are about like I have other ones there that are very like influence based. And so both of those work super well for me as somebody that's public facing with my students, because both of those suggest that like you relate well to people, your relation with other people is a huge motivator. It tends to be one of those things that gets me incited into action. So, but it also has to do a lot with, like I use these kinds of things as an instructor a lot with students as well, because if you can understand what those top strengths are in people, then you can understand also how to frame things to help get them motivated to see why they're worth doing. Because if I'm trying to motivate somebody and I know they've got a bunch of, woo, relator, those kinds of things in there, if I'm trying to go like, hey, here's why we've got to get this done, it's like, hey, think about the other people who rely on you here. Like you would want to get it done for them, right? And that's kind of the ways. Other people might be like achiever types where I like to have a big bullet list of things that I need to get done. And it's like, I get a satisfaction by seeing all those things like checked off and having a sense of, achievement inside of me because I did it. And those two things, like, you may do the same things, both of those people, but you really got to help people see why it is connected to something that they really care about, and those basic values like you're saying, and that they align with those things. So um I don't know, the five that I have is just really funny because when I went through my coach's training for all of this, I was actually just kind of surprised by them because we have a whole domain that are called executing strengths, that all suggest that you're somebody that wants to get it done, or this is just major like behavior of yours. And I didn't have any of those executing ones, to be honest with you, and and I feel like I have a lot of domains where I need to execute, and I think generally, I guess I would think maybe I do those things pretty well, but that's the cool thing about the strengths is when you learn about them, they are their strength is relative to yourself, right? This is a within
Mm.
person rating, so it's kind of like you actually could be relatively strong on all of them, but you're still going to have five strongest ones, right? And so, like, that's the big thing to help people, remember about these strengths is just because things aren't your top five doesn't mean that the others are low in you. It's just relative to those top five, they're maybe not quite as strong.
There may be a super strength person out there whose self relatively lowest strength maybe is stronger than anyone else's like in the universe.
Right. There very well could be. I don't know how we figure it out, but there definitely could be some of that. I just because I was always so surprised by it. I worked at Gallup years and years ago, early 2000s, in the call center and, interviewing people on the phone. And that was when I first took it. And I took it again as a graduate student when I was getting my master's degree. And it was wild. Saw an awful lot of consistency during that time. A few things changed, but these things are dynamic and they're not necessarily meant to be static trait things that never change in their relevant or relative strength. But um, yeah, it was kind of cool. It's, like you and I have talked before that I think it's just a way to help people. It gives them like something concrete, a category or something like that to lean into to help express a little bit about who they are and what they're like. So I just think it's really neat organizing framework for doing that.
Yeah, I was thinking relative to life design, and then maybe like, what we do for a career, then like what we do in our leisure pursuits. I've been fascinated with the idea of volunteerism from the general perspective that I've heard. That one study it looked and it said that somewhere between an hour to three a week of committed volunteerism is beneficial for our subjective well-being. And then sometimes people wind up the response it feels like the responsibilities of life maybe press on people in ways where you wind up in a job or career that maybe wasn't intentional, and so that it feels like sometimes our discretionary time may be the place where we're best able to design, whether it's volunteerism or leisure recreational pursuits or what have you. That idea has like really fascinated me. And in that portion on volunteerism, one that I've heard about that is particularly seems to be fruitful is youth mentoring. And supposedly, from the things that have been studied for increasing a sense of social responsibility, uh, the youth mentoring that doing that in the mentor is the most efficacious thing. And that sort of brings out maybe the inner hidden community builder in folks and mentors when they do that. So that's kind of like another way of um there are these like things that exist that when activated catalyze like greater good things, it feels like. And it's like, what are those things that are out there? And I think this idea of strengths maybe is one of them, but maybe there's like at the individual level there's strengths, and maybe there's like some collective things that are like that too, where if we get together to do like this thing, then that's going to like catalyze like more awesome things that uh have you seen things like that emerging? My guess is that if you, the College of Business is a has a vision of being a strength based college. And there aren't many institutions that I've heard of that are trying to do that.
Correct.
And my guess is that that's the kind of place where something like this might emerge. What are you seeing in general on just that attempt to be strength based? Like, what's it like to be in an environment like that? And have you seen any things like that emerging?
Yeah. No, I think I mean, to a larger extent, I think the way you're describing that is just, like what kind of larger culture emerges kind of as a contagion of, the people and, the expressed or desired focus here at the college to do things like make strengths a real core here. Um, we really definitely have like a culture of it here. I would definitely use that word. Those kinds of things are used all over the place for the students. We are, encouraged to incorporate that kind of stuff into coursework, talking about it a lot with them, helping to use that as a framework to make sense of certain things for the young people. Because a lot of us are obviously like the younger that we are, I think the more we're grasping for something to identify with and something to help, I don't know, put words to the way we feel or the things that are important to us and make sense of things. And so that's used a ton here at the college. It's really actually really neat because I think it's kind of a you know when I teach organizational behavior, we use this there's a really prominent theory uh, is Typhol's social identification theory, right? And if anybody's ever read about social identification, it's basically the root of um, explaining why it is that we like certain people or show certain preference for certain people more than others. And at the basis of it is like, do we have some sense of shared social identity, right? And it may be like, you know, oh, Nick, you and I both have relator as one of our strengths, and so we're relators now, right? And that's a category and something that you and I place ourselves into voluntarily. And now, because we're both relators, I don't know why, but I like you a little more. When I gotta pick somebody or I want to listen to somebody or something like that, I can go like, I can kind of trust Nick. He's like me, and so social identity, I think this is something that incites a bit of social identity and this like shared element amongst the people here. It's one of the neat things about a university is there's a lot of different people in this environment, and the differences are could be like really overwhelming for us, right? But it's not necessarily what we want to always focus on, right? We always look for some element of like something shared amongst us because when we have shared identity, it's like we've found is quite positive for most outcomes, whether it be like between people for getting things done, working together, all those kinds of things. And so when we have such like a broad number of people, like we have thousands of students in this college, um, even having something like that, I think the strengths offer people this, I don't know, commonality or this like these common social identities that they can kind of lean into where two people that never talked before are sitting there and going like, we have two shared strengths in our top five. Like that's nuts. And it may be no deeper than that for these two people, but this is something that catalyzes conversation between people and it's a sense of connectedness. And so I think it plays into our culture a lot here in the college because people who otherwise might go, I got no reason to talk to that person. We got nothing in common. I don't really even desire to talk to them. Now all of a sudden you go like, oh hey, um, I think that what it does is it gives people an excuse also to talk about everyone's favorite topic, which is themselves. Everybody loves that. So I think it kind of gives us that a little bit.
Enough of me talking about me. I'll let you talk about me.
That's right. Tell me about me. Yeah. No,
Maybe that sort of creates a way in which to express our need to belong is that sort of some shared connection there with our strengths that
that's right.
maybe it sort of hits everything. Maybe it lets other people know sort of maybe the flavor of our autonomy needs and becomes a means by which the need for relatedness can occur.
You're gonna have to write a paper about this, Nick.
So there's another construct of psychological capital, and I understand that you were rub elbows maybe with someone that had something to do with the development of this construct.
Just a little bit,
Maybe,
yeah.
yeah, like give us the who, what, how of all that.
Well, you'd be hard pressed to have spent any time around this college in the last like 6 decades and never heard this guy's name, right? But we have an emeritus faculty here who is named Fred Luthans, and there would be very few people I think that we would place in such high regard over the years in our area of research and study, more so than Fred. Fred was a prolific researcher, guy who has made an unbelievable difference in our field about, especially in positive organizational psychology, right? This idea of psychological capital, which um, there are different types of what we call capital in psychology related research, and Fred was the guy to really propose, hey, perhaps there's a psychological capital, right? We have human capital, we've got financial capital, these different kinds of resources. And he said, like, I think we have a thing here called psychological capital as well. And it basically gets used this acronym in this organizing structure that was the hero framework, right? And the hero framework, I believe those the four were, hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism, and that these four things really they shield us. These are the capital that we have internally, right? That we have psychologically that either enhance our abilities or can shield us from, potential harms psychologically. I think these have been shown just in like an unbelievable number of ways to be relevant to a lot of things about people's, self concept, work outcomes, just their experience, all those kinds of things. So Fred was an awesome mentor to me over the years. He's a phenomenal researcher. He was here still as a professor when I was an undergraduate in the early 2000s going here. And um, nobody I enjoyed talking to more than Fred. And I still do constantly. Just an awesome guy. I really love the PsyCap stuff. It's very interesting. So he was kind of the big guy to usher in when positive psychology was making a big wave. And even before it was making a big wave, Fred really was pushing for this idea that positive psychology has a place in organizational science and like management and things like that, what in the area we do.
Another way to say psychological capital that I've been thinking about is mental health. Like
I think in certain interpretations of that, it's not wrong, right? So
it's kind of like the absence of mental illness does not imply the presence of mental health.
this is
What
true.
what is mental health? And I think that those pieces are basically roughly the shape of positive mental health. The ability to bounce back. I think that's kind of the resilience piece. And then that you have meaningful things to do and see pathways to get there. That's like sort of the essence of I've been I've I've been thinking about the science of hope and how the psychologists just use the word hope to refer to this like set of cognitive skills plus agency or willpower.
Mhm.
And I've been thinking like I think the everyday notion of hope is just this belief that tomorrow can be better. And so I've been trying to distinguish and the two and not have to say the science of hope. So how's this sound? How about practical hope for those like goals thinking, pathways thinking, and agency that's there in the science of hope, and then just say hope when you're just talking to the everyday belief that tomorrow can be better. Pathways, hope, and or sorry, practical hope and hope.
Well,
But yeah,
you're definitely sounding like you starting to do research, man, because this sounds like the kind of little nuance we love to get into here, right? So I know, like, we take these like psychological constructs that have been a part of our vocabulary for years and continue to try to break them down and go, is there more, right? Like,
Mm.
can we reduce this, or is there more nuance to this that we didn't give it at first, right? And so, yeah, hope is one of those really interesting latent ideas, right? Because we can't really like hold hope here in our hands. And so inherently a lot of people think something different about what it refers to. But I mean, I can lean into, I appreciate the interpretation of just that belief that things can be better, right? Um, I think that's an essential building block. That it makes a lot of sense that that would be one of those foundational elements of our psychological capital, because being hopeful, being optimistic, um, being resilient, and the other one was what, like self-efficacy, right? And just like believing I can do something, right? There's all these
Hmm.
different psychological frameworks about like the fundamental psychological needs in people, which you were talking about Deci and Ryan's self-determination theory earlier, right? And that was it's really like it hits along some of those very common ideas, right? Because they say your fundamental psychological needs are to feel capable or competent, to feel related, and feel like you have autonomy, right? And so we can see how autonomy would be correlated with our efficacy, right? Because to say that I'm competent and can do something means that I don't know that I believe I can do it, and be resilient with the setbacks, those types of realities, thinking about how things need to be done. I mean, I think there's a lot related between the different ways different people express these somewhat similar ideas, right?
I think that, like, in general, the way that I understand those goods is that if we are not able to realize them, that we'll experience uh, psychological distress. I'm not familiar with how they define that psychological distress, but I wonder if, in addition to helping people understand the positive side of self that is found there in like the Clifton strengths, I'm also wondering if there might be some further nuance to that. Like, say you are looking at your life and you've just seen the strengths finder and you're like, wow, when I think about my life, there's maybe like only like one piece of my life that is really like connecting with my strengths at present. It's like maybe this sort of languishing feeling that I'm having isn't like caused by some external thing affecting me. Maybe it's just I have these strengths that aren't being expressed, and that itself might be a source of some kind of like psychological distress or
Oh,
psychological
dude,
pain.
I think it could be, we use a lot of ways to explain that kind of stuff in, our research. A lot of the times, like a lot of the research, pretty much all the research, right, that we do in my area has to do how these things like affect things in, like a work context.
Yeah.
And one of the big ones in there is, like this JDR model, which is called the Job Demands Resources model, which really, like, if you're familiar with the concept of fit, is really, getting at the heart of that is JDR says, like in any of our environments, right, we're going to have certain demands placed on us, and we have certain resources that we're going to use to meet those demands. And those resources could be physical resources, they could be monetary resources, they could be human resource, they can be psychological resource, like the psychap stuff, or the strengths, these things that are like intrinsic to us. And that model really talks about, like we can either experience really positive or really negative outcomes as a result of what's the disparity between those demands and the resources that we have to meet them. But
Hmm.
there's also stuff that talks about what if I have a whole lot of a certain resource and it just isn't utilized? right? And then that does things psychologically to people, to go like, I know I have a lot to offer, but what I have to offer isn't value. I feel like it isn't valued here, right? They don't need it, or I don't get to exercise it. And so therefore I also can sometimes tend to look at some of those resources as going like, well, what good are they now then? Like, I'm not feeling like I can offer any value, or people don't even see me as valuable, right? Like, that definitely impacts things like your efficacy, because if I go like, well, everywhere I go in my environment now at work, like there seems to be a mismatch, and that is, misfit in those situations. So I think, like definitely there's some validity to what you're saying there, because it really, like, a lot of those models do look at how well do what we have to offer fit with what's needed.
I've heard like strengths, it's like figuring out how to use them appropriately in appropriate amounts at the appropriate time. And it's like overuse, underuse, and yeah, maybe yeah, it has something to do with that. As far as like in the I think it feels like our strengths can maybe help point out like how to express our autonomy and what competencies to develop. And maybe like if those aren't if that isn't happening, if we're not drawing our strengths into fulfilling those psychological needs, like yeah, like or say everything's okay. What if everything's okay, but just there's that question of like, are things optimized? Like, is there does that is there such thing as an upper limit of well-being and human flourishing? It's like uh probably not. Like it feels like it's kind of, or maybe it's like an infinite game that you can get like asymptotically closer to or something. I don't
Well,
know.
I think,
Like
we've hit on like how motivation's really impacted by all this stuff. I don't know if you've ever read anything from there was a social psychology researcher 50 some years ago, well actually even more so than that sometime, but has one of the best names of any researcher, I think, history of the field. Was his name's Victor Vroom. um and just like a car, VROOM. And so Victor Vroom, uh he put together and proposed this thing called the valence instrumentality expectancy model of motivation, which we call expectancy theory. And he basically said that, like all of us, right? It's all about managing our motivations places, and like these strengths and things can have a big part to play. Right? I think it'd be a big tool in all of that, because he always said, the key to feeling motivated, feeling good about what you're doing, and feeling motivated into further action, whether that be like getting the job done, whether it be investing more time and resources into getting even better at my craft. It might be my motivation toward the way that I feel about my job, the way I spend my time, is because of expectancy, instrumentality, and valence. And he basically said that, like, in order to be motivated, to exert effort towards something, we got to believe first that, well, our performance will lead to, or like the effort that we have will lead to good performance, which you could probably see is similar to that idea that self-efficacy, I've got what it takes, right? um if I exert my effort, something good will happen. The instrumentality thing is that good performance is going to be rewarded, right? So like I'm going to get something, it's worth it to do good work. And then valence, the rewards that I get from it are actually valuable and desirable to me, right? So which is why we can't give people as rewards like things they don't care about, right? And so motivation has to do with all of that. And I think, like when we maybe see this mismatch between the things that are at their core the strongest in us, these strengths things about us, if we see like around in our environment and we don't think that anyone cares, or our current role doesn't actually use those things that are best about us, then, well, hard for us to, like argue for many of those, domains of expectancy. And as a result of that, like if I don't think that, my effort is going to lead to me performing well, if I also don't think it even matters, and I don't think I'm going to be rewarded, or if I do, they're going to try to give me something I don't care about, then I'm not going to be motivated to do any of it, right? And so, it kind of takes me back to those funny, they've been beating this joke to death on the internet for a long time, right? It's the whole, it really gets at expectancy, those jokes that people have made about, these working in these companies where the top brass comes in and goes, "Oh, awesome. You guys led to a $10 million increase in our profits this year, so we're going to have a pizza party for everybody." The reason people don't, react very positively to those kinds of things.
Emerging leadership.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned one thing that I see in that vein, the youth, like mentoring as a thing that feels like brings out the leader in some people. As that sense of social responsibility grows, it's like I can't not get involved, or maybe, or like maybe pain if you don't, or maybe there's some joy and meaning if you do, or maybe a little bit of both. Like that's kind of I think for myself, something that I've found is that it might be, I don't know if this is possible, but I feel like needing to be involved in like the positive side of community building, like that it's so vital to, for me when I like look back and think about my involvement and things like that over my life. And when I haven't been, it feels like if I'm not, that I have difficulty showing up and being present to the relationships that matter most to me even. And that is like, I don't know if that's just a result of my own belief system, or could I actually be wired that way. um but anyway, yeah, like you're you're a psychologist, right? Like yeah.
Oh yeah. No,
what's
well,
what's going on there?
well, man, I we obviously have different people who kind of have different levels. Like this is just kind of hinting again at, like when we talk about internally, relative elements, right? This would be one of those, I think, like for you, right? Like I think we all have a continuum of how much I guess we need to feel like we're involved in those kinds of activities and the things that we get involved in, right? Like I think some of the time maybe if we think about it from like that, impact element, or seeing that the stuff that we spend our time doing really impacts something, we can feel good about it intrinsically. I think, like certain people I think need different levels of involvement in order to really like spark that in themselves. Some people are fine just showing up to things other people organize because they're not an organizer, those kinds of things. They probably appreciate you a ton for being the person willing to do that, because they'd go, I don't want all that responsibility. But it's reflective of I've been thinking about this idea lately with the emergent leadership thing, like in all these contexts, is for a long time, we always thought about being granted those kinds of roles, being the person that everybody says, oh, yeah, I've seen that person. I definitely think of that person as being very influential and they're very involved. And I think of them as like one of the main people or the main person overseeing all of this. And like, when they say something, I'm very inclined to listen to them and allow them to influence like the direction that things go, even though like nobody is formally in charge, right? Um, and it's really interesting because we've always done this research based on the assumption that that's like a role or something that everyone would desire to kind of be in. And we're actually finding that to be like somewhat dwindling, which is kind of interesting. There's been some articles written about this recently in popular press, and we're starting to, think a little bit more through this on the research side is, initial surveys over the last couple of years have looked at what we call motivation to lead, which is this idea about, like how strongly do people feel motivated to be a leader and take on those kinds of roles and influence the direction of things. And in our youngest people and like our Gen Z generation, at least right now, we're finding like unprecedentedly high rates of people saying, "I don't want to do any of that." In my in my OB class, it's about, like we talk about management and leadership and the difference between these ideas a lot, and just find surprisingly few young people right now that say that they think leading anything would be attractive. Most of them, they just go like, no, like I'm gonna put my time in and go home, and I don't want any extra responsibility. And I don't know if it's because of these like rising levels of anxiety in people, and so like their psychological resources are have dwindled so much that they go like, I can't put anything else on my plate because it's going to exceed, we talked about job demands and resources. We'd go like, I only have enough cognitive resources to handle what's on my plate right now, and I can't do anything else. And so like when I'm done for the day, I want to go home, and I don't want you telling me I have any more responsibility, even though you always tell me, oh, this is a real honor to have people look at you that way. And like we have a lot of younger people that have expressed to me that they go, no, that's just extra thankless responsibility. And so I go like, I wonder if it's really that disparity between what it feels like the world's demanding of people right now and when we have dwindling cognitive resources because we're so like stressed out and tied up in it all the time, and we're giving all of our attention to all these like rapidly changing things that at their basis are very hollow. They're not meaningful interaction, but we think we could get all of our interaction through, like digital mediums or things like that, and that just doesn't fulfill the same kind of psychological needs. It's does a very poor job in comparison. And so I think like it's sort of like I think people just have this like constantly, it's sort of like somebody's constantly, like taking buckets of water out of this pool that people have, and nobody's ever putting any more water in the pool. So at the end, what do we become? We become really like resource scarce, afraid people, and we don't stay open to this like yes to life idea that we were talking about earlier. They go like, I'm more inclined just to say no because I'm going to act off of my threat response rather than the possibilities of what could be, because I just don't have any extra resources in order to like frame it that way right now.
I'm thinking of a few things. I there's a movie, I forget the name of it, but it's about Boys Town. There's like a Hollywood movie version of it like long ago, and I think it's either in the introduction or the end where he's kind of reminiscing, and I think the whole movie's kind of a memory, and he's like, if I'd have only just had one friend, and it's like I was thinking the corollary might be like if I only had one interest, like like if there's some one thing that you're like actually interested in, like to your core, like it feels like those can kind of be like the difference maybe between being in that threat response, like hopeless, helpless mindset, and then like moving more into that like constructive approach to
Yeah.
uh
Well, I think that's where no,
living
I think that's where
life.
Gallup got it right. Like I think that they used the right framing when they chose like, if you're familiar, I know you'll be familiar with this, Nick, because I know you have experience with them as well, but you remember the drops in your bucket, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And they'd have these the little like water droplets and you write out something you appreciate about someone and you go and pin it on their desk and stuff. And like, we still have those around the college here. And it's just like a random opportunity to, like lift someone up a little and tell them what you appreciate about them, right? And I think the metaphor was perfect there. They just said, yeah, help fill people's bucket back up. Because come on, like everybody needs it. There's a lot of things all day that take your resources away. Why don't we make a conscious effort to like let's build them back up in people a little bit too and have some focus on that.
Yeah, and the beauty of the psychological economy, this may be the only economy where one plus one can equal three. Where like you when you try to fill someone else's bucket, usually you wind up with your own bucket filled. It doesn't deplete your bucket to fill someone else's bucket
That's right,
psychologically.
man. I mean, that's the whole like that's the contagion effect of your mental framing and behavior becoming normative for you is more you do something, the more normal it feels and the better it feels actually. And that can work with almost anything, right? And so like I think that's the neat thing about it is we look to like fill the buckets of other people and we inadvertently fill our own in some capacity because it's just like when you and I were talking earlier where I think I made some comment that that adage that when you got a hammer in your hand it's amazing everything in the world's a nail and so being focused on the positive elements of other people and what they bring and all the like the good things that's a hammer, right? And as soon as you start using that, then you're drawn to all of those good things around you in the world and you see them. It's the same as when you want to have, a negative framed mind is when you start going, everything sucks. Well, then super strange how many things that suck you end up seeing in the world all the time, right? But it's just not objectively that way because it's not objectively either way. So it's just like, there's your autonomy for you, man. One of the biggest autonomous decisions you can have in your life is, well, do you want to look at everything and say it sucks, or do you want to look at things and say, like, this is pretty awesome? There's a lot of opportunity here, right? There's a lot of good I can see because I don't know. I'd rather take the optimistic route, man. It's like, world's going to surprise you either way, but I'd rather, like believe in the good in people most of the time rather than the opposite because I just find myself in a better place.
A little thought that came to me recently was when I look back, I want to like look through the lens of gratitude. When I look forward, I want to look through the lens of hope. And in living today, I want to live in the lens of serenity. Speaking of looking into the future, when you look into the future, what would you like to be doing?
Along your lines of what you just said, I always tell my students that the only reason I feel like I am capable of teaching them about something or like guiding them through thinking about things like designing their life and finding things that help make them happy is because I feel like I'm doing it from a place where I feel that way. In the future, I obviously want to like pursue opportunities within this profession that I think help really just strengthen that kind of feeling in me. I've done a bunch of different, projects on different, personally meaningful topics. Like I told you, I've been, looking at this thing of attention because like I would really love to bring this to the forefront of people's minds and like realize the value of their attention and something they might overlook. I love that kind of stuff. I love taking these opportunities, like you said earlier about you brought up Rwanda and I take student groups to Rwanda for a month in the summer and we hang out in Kigali, Rwanda, and Central Africa. We travel around the country. We meet local entrepreneurs and thought leaders, and we talk about, like, what's it like to try to pursue your ideas in an emerging economy, maybe in one where there aren't all of the avenues for like financial and social support like there might be in the United States sometimes. And those kinds of things, man, if we're talking about filling our bucket up, man, like that's the kind of stuff I just really love. And I think it's because, when I did all of that stuff and I looked at my three columns and my maker mix, the one by far that was most important to me is I gotta really have a strong impact element in my job. And I think it
Hmm.
really kind of helped me realize why I wasn't very satisfied with some stuff in the past. But I gotta be careful because this job, also I could slip into avenues or choices in my current career that would take all of the perception of impact out of it.
Hmm.
And so I got to say yes to those extra things like, does everybody want the responsibility of taking, a group of 20-year-olds to Africa for a month and look and like everything that goes along with that? Like it's always wild, it's always fun for different reasons, but like it's one of those things that I go, yeah, if I don't say yes, I mean, I'm just really limiting an avenue for me to have a really meaningful and impactful experience. So, like, I can't say I definitely always know exactly what that's going to look like moving forward, but, like, I look to really, I would love to stay in this profession. I really love it. I've enjoyed it more than anything I've ever done. And I think it just really, like, it speaks to me in a lot of the ways that I would like my job to speak to me. It's like I feel like I do something impactful. I have a lot of great relational experiences with people. I get unique opportunities to go places, travel, speak about my ideas, and I also get the opportunity to hopefully influence some young people at a time where they really need it. And I don't know all the avenues that I'm going to keep doing that in, but I guess it's just I got to keep that yes to life idea. Like sometimes those things are just gonna introduce themselves to me, and I got to be there ready to say yeah when a lot of other people may not. And I'm maybe not the most careful planner of everything in my life, and so I can definitely say with some certainty that I go, hey man, when I've come in this environment and just been willing to say yes to things have very often worked out in a way I'm quite happy with, even though I didn't have any clue where they were going or how it would happen. Just got a little bit of confidence that pursuing things that you love and are interesting to you and have an impact, and if that matters to you, then I don't see any way that it doesn't turn out in a way that you're at least happy for the experience after it's gone on.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.